Welcome back to Visionary Audiobook, where stories come to life. Today, I'm excited to introduce a brand new tale that will transport you to a world filled with mystery, adventure, and unforgettable characters. In this story, we'll explore what if the Ashen One had the gamer system. As the story unfolds, expect twists, thrills, and moments that will keep you on the edge of your seat. So, sit back, relax, and let's dive into this new adventure together. I hope you enjoy this journey as much as I've enjoyed creating it for you. Title: The Ashen Awakening Chapter 1. Foreign Ash's sharp gas shattered the stillness of a dark and foggy world. The man's eyes fluttered open, his mind shrouded in confusion. He lay on a cold, uneven stone surface, his breath shallow and erratic. His body felt wrong, as if it belonged to someone else. His arms were heavy, his fingers stiff. The air was thick with a damp, earthy scent. Slowly, he propped himself up, his back creaking as he gazed around, his brow furrowed. Where am I? His voice was hoarse, almost foreign to him. He didn't remember how he got here. He didn't remember anything. The world around him seemed to shift as he stared into the gloom. All he saw were rows of gravestones, their weathered surfaces standing solemnly in the fog like forgotten souls. Tall, jagged monuments rose like silent sentinels, marking the resting places of those long past. Their names had worn away over the centuries, only faint, indecipherable carvings left behind. In the distance, he could barely make out a silhouette of what appeared to be a crumbling castle, its jagged towers piercing the bleak sky. The wind whispered through the air, carrying an unnatural chill. It tugged at the tattered clothes clinging to his body, dull, weather-beaten rags that offered little comfort against the cold. His hands trembled as they explored his attire, a strange mixture of old leather and cloth, badly worn from what seemed like years of neglect. "What is this place?" he muttered again, his voice trembling with unease. His heart pounded harder in his chest, uncertainty gnawing at him. Then, as if from nowhere, a voice cold, robotic, yet distinctly feminine, echoed inside his mind. "Welcome, player. You have been transported to the Ashen Cemetery. This is the world you must survive. The system is initializing now." His eyes snapped wide open. His pulse quickened. "What the hell?" he whispered to himself, disbelief and panic crashing over him in waves. System initialization complete. User identified unknown. Please choose your path, player. His mouth went dry. He had no idea what was going on, but the words player and system sent a chill down his spine. He knew exactly what this meant. He had played Dark Souls 3. He knew this place. He knew the rules. This wasn't a dream. This wasn't some strange hallucination. This was real. "Wait, no. This can't be happening," he shouted, his voice rising in fear. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. He had spent countless hours in this game before, cursing the unfair difficulty, the punishing mechanics, the relentless enemies. The voice spoke again, soothing and eerily calm. "This is your new reality. The system exists to ensure you have a chance. Your survival depends on your decisions. All your actions will affect your fate in this world." A cold shiver ran through him. This was real, and the knowledge that he was stuck in a world of his own making, one that he knew would grind him down, was terrifying. But there was a small glimmer of something inside him, something that made the fear momentarily dissipate. He wasn't completely alone. He had the system. It was his lifeline, a thread of possibility in a world that seemed hostile at best. He took a deep breath and looked around, his eyes scanning the cemetery once more. This place, this graveyard. It was a beginning area. The Ashen Cemetery, he knew it well. From here, enemies would swarm, and the only way forward was to fight. A wave of dread crashed over him. "Okay," he muttered to himself, swallowing his fear. "Okay. Let's just see what I'm working with." He reached into his mind, mentally commanding the system to show him his stats. A translucent window materialized before his eyes. Character name, unknown gender. Male souls obtained, 0 HP, 100 FP, 0 vigor, 6 attunement, 3 endurance, 5 vitality, 7 strength, 9 dexterity, 6 intelligence, 8 faith for luck, 5 skills and abilities. Basic swordsmanship. Level 1 special move. /special move. Overhead strike. The number stood out to him like a gauntlet thrown in his face. Level 1. That was all. I'm so underprepared, he muttered to himself, feeling a wave of panic rise again. His stats were low, and his skills were minimal. He was no warrior, no knight, just a random guy tossed into a world where death came quickly. But there was no turning back now. No safe spaces. No hand-holding. Only the endless grind of survival. He exhaled slowly, fighting to steady his nerves. "All right, focus," he muttered. "There has to be something here." He began to move slowly, feeling the weight of his body as he limped toward one of the nearby gravestones. He ran his fingers over the cold stone surface, searching for anything that might be useful. His hand brushed against something. A glint of metal caught his eye. A rusted sword. It lay half buried in the dirt beside the gravestone. With a sigh of relief, he grabbed it, pulling it from the earth. The sword felt heavy in his hands, dull and worn, but it was something, better than nothing. He gave it a few experimental swings, the blade creaking as it moved through the air. A window popped up, and the same robotic voice filled his mind again. Basic swordsmanship acquired. Level 1. Special move, /. Level 1. Special move, overhead strike. Level 1. A progress bar appeared beneath each special move, only 5% filled. A small, almost imperceptible sense of hope bloomed within him. Maybe, just maybe, he could survive this. With the sword in hand, he felt a surge of determination flood his veins. The first enemy would come soon, and he would face it, no matter how terrified he felt. Taking a steadying breath, he nodded to himself. It's time to move forward. And with that, the protagonist turned and stepped toward the heart of the cemetery, the first step of many in a journey where survival was never guaranteed. The fog thickened, and the shadows seemed to shift as though watching him, but there was no turning back now. Chapter 2. Cemetery of Ash. The stillness of the Cemetery of Ash was eerie, with the air thick with a sense of decay. The protagonist's grip tightened around his rusted sword as his gaze fixed on the cloaked figure, standing motionless in the distance. He recognized the silhouette, the very first of the abominations that lurked in this forsaken place. The figure, its tattered cloak fluttering lightly in the wind, had not yet moved, but the protagonist knew better than to assume it was anything but dangerous. Drawing his sword, the blade heavy with the weight of its rust and neglect, he took slow, deliberate steps forward. The moment he crossed the 15-meter threshold, the ghoul sprang to life. A horrific, decayed face emerged from beneath the hood, hollow, with its skin barely clinging to its skeletal frame. Its eyes were dark hollows, void of life, and its skin a sickly grayish color, barely holding itself together. It hissed, a guttural sound that grated on the ears, and with a jerky movement, it lunged forward. In its hands, a broken silver dagger gleamed under the pale sky. Instinct took over. Without thinking, the protagonist rolled to the side as the dagger swung toward him, its edge grazing the air where he had been just moments before. His heart pounded in his chest, adrenaline flooding his system. He muttered to himself, his voice steady. "I will not die." With a surge of determination, he charged forward, aiming his sword for the ghoul's neck. The creature, anticipating the move, swung the dagger in a wide arc, aiming to intercept him. But the protagonist planted his feet firmly at the last moment, dodging the blade by mere inches. His body was already in motion as he launched a forward slash, his rusted blade cleaving through the ghoul's neck. The head separated cleanly from its body, which slumped lifelessly to the ground. The protagonist staggered slightly, using his sword as support as he caught his breath. He glanced down at the fallen body, feeling an unsettling pull from the slain creature. A voice, cold and mechanical, echoed in his mind. Soul detected. Soul absorption commencing. A strange sensation washed over him as the ghoul's soul, an ethereal fragment of energy, moved toward him. He felt a fleeting sense of fulfillment, as though the act of absorbing the soul filled some empty void. Soul obtained. The system's words hung in air like a dull echo. The protagonist glanced at the soul count. 30 souls. His brow furrowed in frustration. High risk, high reward, he muttered with a sarcastic edge, rolling his eyes. I'm gambling my life, and this is the amount I get. He closed the system window with a sigh, brushing off his irritation. As he turned his gaze forward, something caught his eye, a faint glimmer beneath a stone cauldron-like disk. A small object. His curiosity piqued, but something told him to remain cautious. Just beyond the cauldron, another cloaked ghoul lay dead, but the air around it was unnerving. Before he could even process the thought, the system chimed in once again. The skill intuition has been acquired. Description: the user is able to sense oddities and danger instinctually. The protagonist smirked, the corners of his mouth curling upwards. "Not bad," he murmured, gripping his sword with renewed confidence. He stepped forward, eyes narrowing as he advanced. The ghoul suddenly sprang to life, but it was too late. With a single fluid motion, the protagonist charged, his rusted sword slicing through the air in a decisive arc. The blade split the ghoul's skull in two, and before the body could even twitch, the soul was absorbed, drifting toward him like a wisp of smoke. Soul obtained. He knelt down, fingers brushing against the object that had caught his attention. The system's voice immediately echoed in his mind. Detection: Ashen Estus Flask. The protagonist's eyes narrowed as he checked his FP stats. It read 0-0, a rare sight. In the base game, this wasn't supposed to happen. Guess I'm not attuned to magic yet, he mused, staring at the flask in his hand. The system seemed to sense his uncertainty and spoke up. User can gain the ability to feel and use magic if the Ashen Estus Flask is consumed. The protagonist's heart skipped a beat. Magic. The prospect was tantalizing. A new path forward. He wasted no time, uncorking the flask and bringing it to his lips. The moment the cool, blue liquid slid down his throat, an overwhelming warmth spread through his chest. He felt an odd sensation, as if energy was gathering inside him, collecting in his very bones. Every fiber of his being buzzed with newfound sensitivity. His senses were sharper, more alive than ever before. A blue system window materialized before him. User has drunk an Ashen Estus Flask for the first time. +2 to intelligence. +3 to attunement. User is now able to use magic. A feeling of satisfaction bloomed inside him. His ability to wield magic was no longer just a possibility. It was reality. He looked at his new stats with a sense of pride. Protagonist stats. Character name, unknown gender. Male souls obtained. 70 HP, 100 FP, 0-100 vigor, 6 attunement, 6 endurance, 5 vitality, 7 strength, 9 dexterity, 6 intelligence, 10 faith for luck, 5 skills and abilities, basic swordsmanship, level 1 special move, / level 1 special move, overhead strike. Level 1 A smile crept across his face. He knew the journey ahead would be difficult, but for now, progress was tangible. He turned to the system, saying aloud, "System, open inventory. System function not available." Frustration flared up within him, his smile faltering. "Just when things were looking up, you're telling me I'm content locked out of system functions?" He rubbed his temple, feeling a headache begin to form. The system's voice was calm, almost soothing. The gamer system offers many benefits to the user. The user must strive to progress to unlock additional functions. He exhaled slowly, holding back his irritation. "Fine, I get it." Time passed. An hour, perhaps more, as he navigated the cemetery, battling ghouls and absorbing their souls. Each fight made him stronger, more attuned to the flow of battle. Eventually, he found himself at a crossroads. One path led straight ahead, toward a rocky cliff that curved leftward. The vast, open sky beckoned on the horizon. The other path, narrower, wedged itself between towering cliffs. The protagonist paused, a feeling of dread settling in his gut. He couldn't recall what lay at the end of that path, but he knew it held something valuable. Trusting his newfound intuition, he turned left, towards a cliff. As he walked, his mind swirled with thoughts of the castle he could see in the distance, Lothric perhaps? A kingdom filled with dangers, but also promises. Yet for now, his focus remained on the task at hand. He walked further, and soon he came upon a bonfire, its flame unlit. Kneeling beside it, a system window popped up. "Do you wish to link the bonfire?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes." As soon as he gave his affirmation, flames erupted from the base of the bonfire, spreading like a cleansing fire that illuminated the area. He felt the warmth rush through his body, his fatigue fading as the fire rejuvenated him. A sense of renewal filled him, his wounds from earlier battles no longer stinging, his energy restored. Looking to his right, The protagonist saw slanted ruins that led down to the bottom of the hill. He made his way toward them, immediately encountering 4 more ghouls. The first was dispatched with ease. A few strikes of his rusted sword, and it was no more. But then his intuition flared. 2 more ghouls ambushed him from the side. Despite his prior warning, their erratic movements caught him off guard. They managed to land a few scratches, but with swift, calculated strikes, he killed them both. The final ghoul was different. Armed with a spear and shield, it was a tougher opponent. He ducked and dodged as the spear thrust toward him, narrowly avoiding a potentially lethal blow. He lashed out with a forward strike, but the shield blocked it effortlessly. Irritation surged in his chest, but he remained focused. When the ghoul aimed for his chest, he ducked under the thrust, shifting behind it. The ghoul tried to retaliate, but the protagonist was already 2 steps ahead, delivering a powerful overhead strike that split its skull open. Exhausted, he collapsed onto the ground, panting heavily. Sweat poured down his face as he tried to catch his breath. The system, however, chimed in once again. Overhead strike has leveled up. Overhead strike is now at level 2. The protagonist couldn't help but grin, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. Overhead strike, a strong downward strike that deals 20% more damage. Overhead strike level 2, increased damage by 30%. He felt a small surge of pride. Progress. It felt good. Turning to the system, he muttered, "Show me the number of souls in my possession." His soul count had increased to 700. It was a start. He glanced toward the entrance of the stone ruins. His smile faded as he saw what awaited him. A figure knelt in the middle of the ruins, a familiar, terrifying sight. Gunder, the man who would test him beyond his limits. Taking a deep breath, the protagonist walked forward, stepping into the ruins. His life was about to be on the line. Chapter 3. The knight who waits the protagonist stood silently before the towering form of Gunder, his gaze fixed on the inanimate body of the knight. His mind raced, replaying the movements he had studied in the game, the swings, the dodges, the moments of vulnerability. In the game, he had taken down Gunder countless times. Yet here, before him, was a living, breathing knight. A stark reminder that this world wasn't the same as the one he knew. He smiled to himself. This should be easy, he thought. After all, it wasn't his champion variation. He stepped closer, his grip tightening on his sword. Pulling the coiled sword from Gunder's chest, a shiver ran through the air. The ground trembled slightly, as if responding to his actions. Then, in a startling move, Gunder's eyes snapped open, his chest rising with a deep, guttural breath. The knight stood, his towering form almost too much to fathom. He took his iron spear from the ground, steadying himself with a slow, deliberate motion. A deep, resonant voice broke the silence. "State your name and the master you serve." The word sent a jolt through the protagonist. He had never heard Gunder speak in a game, not like this. The reality of his situation hit him harder than before. This was no longer a game. The protagonist swallowed hard, his grip tightening on his sword. His heart raced, but he forced himself to remain calm. "I don't know much about myself," he said, voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "I serve no one. I just want to go to the tower." He hesitated for a moment, an odd thought bubbling up. "The game called me the Ashen One." "You can call me by my title," he said, trying to steady his breathing. "The Ashen One." A flicker of disdain crossed Gunder's face. "How impudent of thee to seek a place thou dost not belong," he replied, voice dripping with contempt. "To claim such a title is blasphemy." Gunder lifted his spear behind him, readying himself for an attack. The protagonist, anticipating the move, instinctively prepared to jump back. He knew how Gunder fought. He knew every swing, every move. But the knight's next action was faster than expected. Before he could react, Gunder's spear appeared in front of him, striking with devastating force. The blow tore through the air, crashing into the protagonist's chest. Pain exploded through his body. Blood flew from his mouth as he was sent careening backward, his body slamming into the ground nearly 40 meters away. His vision blurred with the intensity of the impact. His chest felt like it had been crushed, each breath a firestorm of agony. His body was covered in bruises, the searing pain making it impossible to think clearly. Even though he knew exactly how Gunder would strike, he couldn't move fast enough to avoid the blow. Health, 46%. The system's notification was like a cold slap in the face. He had barely begun to process the pain when the overwhelming sense of dread settled in. I can't lose here, he thought, forcing his shaking body to stand. Gunder, undeterred, began to slowly walk toward him. Each step felt like the weight of the world bearing down on him. It was as if the night's very presence was a nightmare drawing near. Without warning, Gunder surged forward, sprinting to the left with lightning speed, his spear sweeping in a deadly arc toward the protagonist's head. The protagonist's instinct screamed at him, and without thinking, he rolled toward Gunder, trusting his gut. His body moved on its own, every sense tuned to survival. The spear missed by a hair's breadth. Gunder didn't pause. With a smooth, fluid motion, he spun on his heel and executed a wide, vicious swing. The protagonist's heart raced. He was in the knight's range again, but something told him to act fast. This time, the protagonist didn't hesitate. His fear and determination merged as one, and with a grunt, he launched himself forward, his sword aimed at Gunder's side. He didn't think. He acted. The blow landed. There was a sharp, metallic ring as the sword struck Gunder's armor. But the protagonist wasn't finished. Magic surged through him, instinctively coursing through the blade. The weapon exploded in a burst of energy, shards of magic and metal flying in every direction, sending both him and Gunder sprawling backward. New skill, magic channeling. The system's notification barely reached his ears. He was too exhausted to process it. His body was drained, his limbs heavy and aching. The burst of energy had been his last-ditch attempt. Now he could barely stand, his health plummeting to 32%. Gunder, however, was unfazed. He righted himself, using his spear as leverage, and began walking toward the protagonist with unyielding intent. The protagonist's back hit the edge of a cliff, the drop below seeming like an abyss waiting to claim him. "Lowly peasant," Gunder murmured, his voice low and contemptuous. "Thou shouldst learn never to blink in the face of any arms." A wave of thoughts crashed over the protagonist. Is this it? He wondered. Am I going to die here? Will I return to the bonfire? Or will I disappear entirely? Fear and doubt threatened to consume him. But through it all, a surge of determination ignited within him. He would not die here, not without a fight. A plan formed in his mind, even as his body screamed for rest. As Gunder's spear swung down, the protagonist made his move. He dipped his body just enough for the spear to graze his shoulder, the pain sharp but manageable. With all his remaining strength, he shifted his weight forward, striking Gunder with the hilt of his sword. As the two weapons collided, the protagonist infused the hilt and Gunder's spear with the last remnants of his magical power. The explosion that followed was massive, 3 times the size of Gunder's imposing form. The shockwave sent debris flying, a thick cloud of dust filling the air. When the smoke cleared, Gunder was nowhere to be seen. The protagonist had no idea if he was dead or merely thrown off the cliff. But there was no time to question it. He collapsed to the ground, his body a wreck of exhaustion and injury. Health, 2%. His left arm was nearly useless, dislocated and burned from the magic's backlash. His body felt like it was being pulled apart, but he could still hear someone, on the edge of the cliff. The sound of heavy armor shifting. He looked up through bleary eyes, a voice booming in his ears. A hand reached down from the edge of the cliff, pulling a massive figure into view. It was Gunder, alive. The protagonist's heart sank as the knight stood tall once more, as though nothing had happened. Gunder walked back to the center of the battlefield, as though the entire fight had been an inconvenience. Rage boiled up in the protagonist's chest, stronger than the pain, stronger than the fear. But it was too much. His vision blackened as darkness claimed him. You died. Your consciousness will now disappear. Despair rushed over him like a flood. His thoughts fractured as the blackness deepened. He would never see the tower. He would never return. His journey had ended. But then another system notification appeared, cutting through the despair. Resurrection cost 300 souls. Player has 700 souls. Funds available. Initializing resurrection. A surge of warmth of life suddenly filled the protagonist's senses. He gasped, jerking awake. He was sitting in front of a bonfire on the rocky cliff, his body sore but alive. Fear, confusion, and relief swirled within him. But through it all, one thing burned stronger than anything else. A need for revenge. Hashtag Chapter 4. Rage of the Undying, the Ashen One sat in front of the flickering bonfire, his body aching from the brutal battle against Gunder. His chest heaved as the last remnants of pain faded, but the defeat still gnawed at him, deep and relentless. He stared at his hands, which had once held the power to defeat this world's greatest foes. He would defeat Gunder. He swore it to himself. This is not the end. With grim determination, he reached into his inventory, checking the souls he had collected from his enemies, only to find they were gone. All of them. Just like the game, he muttered under his breath, frustration bubbling up inside. The system chimed in, its mechanical voice cold and emotionless. Due to users spending souls to revive, a portion of collected souls have been lost. Note, each revival will cost more souls than the last. The reality of his situation hit him like a physical blow. He could feel the weight of it in his chest. Every time he died, he lost not only his progress but a part of his potential. Constantly dying is not a viable option. He knew that now. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about managing his souls. The Ashen One clenched his fist in frustration. Is there a training mode? He asked aloud, though he wasn't sure why. The system might have something, right? The system paused for a moment before responding, searching database for training mode. Feature not found. Access denied. Feature has not yet been unlocked. The Ashen One's teeth ground together in frustration. Damn it! He cursed under his breath, the anger rising again. This world, this game, was different, more dangerous than anything he had ever imagined. But there had to be a way to gain strength. There had to be a way to become stronger. He turned his attention to his stats and skills, his eyes scanning through them. I can't keep relying on random drops or souls alone. What I need is to improve, to train. The thought echoed in his mind. He remembered how his previous skills had been developed through sheer action, through the very act of fighting. Maybe that's my answer. Without hesitation, he stood up, his eyes scanning the rocky terrain around him. He needed to test his theory. Gripping his sword, he started running, sprinting across the uneven ground. His body moved faster than he had before, the motion fluid and almost instinctual. New skill. Dash, the system chimed, and the Ashen One grinned. It worked. It really worked. He wasn't sure how or why, but the skill had unlocked simply from running. His body burned with excitement as he felt a new surge of energy within him. This was it. This was how he would grow stronger. Next, he turned his attention to the surrounding ghouls that had begun to respawn after his brief rest. He attacked with purpose, focusing not on brute force, but on using his newly acquired skills. Forward slash, overhead strike, dash, magic channeling. He dodged and weaved, moving like water, using his agility and growing power to defeat them one by one. It felt different this time, not just like mindless combat, but like he was learning, evolving. Each time he defeated a group of ghouls, he walked back to the bonfire to rest, and the enemies would respawn, ready for the next round. For hours, he repeated the process, fighting, growing, resting, and repeating. For hours later, the Ashen One sat back down, feeling the familiar warmth of the bonfire's glow on his skin. He opened his status menu to check his progress. A blue system window appeared. Basic Swordsman level 3 skill. / level 5 skill. Overhead strike level 5 skill. Dash level 6 skill. Magic channeling level 3 skill. Intuition level 2. He couldn't help but smile. He had made progress. Real progress. But something gnawed at him. Basic Swordsman. Intuition. Those were the hardest to level up, and yet they were the most important. If he wanted to survive and defeat Gunder, he needed to improve them faster. As he stared at his progress, a green system notification appeared. System shop unlocked. The Ashen One blinked in surprise. A shop? The thought was foreign to him. He opened the system menu and browsed the list of items available for purchase. He had been grinding for hours, and now, the rewards seemed to materialize in front of him. Things that could help him survive, maybe even help him defeat Gunder. He had 9,000 souls. But there was a catch. He couldn't level up here, not without reaching the tower. Still, this was a good opportunity to stock up on supplies, to give him an edge in battle. He scrolled through the list, looking for something useful. His eyes landed on an item that made his heart skip. Estus Flask, 2 for 4,000 souls. His mouth went dry. The Estus Flask, the one item every adventurer relied on. It was the key to healing, to staying alive longer. He didn't have anything like it in his inventory, and here it was in front of him. It wasn't much, but it would make all the difference. Without hesitation, he bought the flasks, watching his soul count drop to 5,000. But it was worth it. Healing would give him the edge he needed. Next, he scrolled through weapons, but most of them were far too expensive. He needed something basic. He didn't need a legendary weapon. He just needed something reliable. Then, he found it. Iron Longsword, 4,500 souls. The sword was in pristine condition, and its description caught his eye. Due to the materials used, it can adapt to any magic it comes into contact with. It was perfect. Not the best weapon, but certainly better than the one he was using. Without hesitation, he purchased the sword, leaving him with only 500 souls. With the Estus flask in one hand and the iron longsword in the other, the Ashen One stood tall, his body filled with a new sense of purpose. He wasn't just a lost soul in this world anymore. He was a warrior, determined to face Gundar again. A wave of anger surged through him, followed by an unshakable determination. He was ready. He would defeat Gundar, and nothing would stop him. He began walking toward the ruins where Gundar had fallen, his eyes fixed on the misty wall that marked the entrance. This is it, he thought, his heart pounding in his chest. I'm going to finish this fight. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey here at Visionary Audiobook. I hope you enjoyed the story as much as I enjoyed bringing it to life for you. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an adventure. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. Until next time, keep your imagination alive, and I'll see you in the next story.